I resume function as the President of the Council. I now give the floor to the Permanent Observer of the Observer State of Palestine.
Mr. President, I wish to begin my statement by conveying deepest condolences to the government, people, and my good friend Vasily. Our condolences of the Russian Federation following the horrific terrorist attack in Moscow. We express our sympathy to the bereaved families and stand in solidarity with our Russian brothers and sisters in these difficult days. Mr. President, it has taken 6 months, over 100,000 Palestinians killed and maimed, 2 million displaced, and famine for this Council to finally demand an immediate ceasefire. A vote for humanity to prevail, for life to prevail. The Palestinians in Gaza pleaded and appealed, shouted, cried, cursed, prayed, defied the odds to survive time and time again, and yet continue to face death, destruction and displacement, deprivation and disease, and an occupation-made famine. They are bombed, besieged, buried under the rubble of the houses they had built. They are killed in their homes, in the streets, in hospitals, in ambulances, in UN shelters, and even in tents. Their ordeal must come to an end and must come to an immediate end now. As we speak, families prepare to break their fast, missing loved ones around the table, and they will find nothing to put on their children's plate. In fact, there is no home sheltering them. There is no table to gather around, and no plates to fill and no food to eat. They lost their homes. They lost loved ones, some of them still trapped under the rubble. Imagine being a parent with kids under the rubble and others alive, feeling broken, but forced to go on for those who remained. Yesterday, Palestinian Christians celebrated Palm Sunday in besieged and destroyed churches that have become shelters in Gaza. They gathered, surrounded by death and praying for resurrection. Palestinian families cannot mourn or heal. They have to find a way to survive and help what is left of their family survive. Mr. President, when such atrocities are being committed in broad daylight against defenseless civilians, including women and children, the right thing to do, the only thing to do morally, legally, politically, is to put an end to it. There can be no justification for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Accepting any justification for such crimes is renouncing our humanity and destroying the rule of international law beyond repair. Mr. President, 2 months ago, the highest international court, the ICJ, determined there was a real and imminent risk of irreparable prejudice to the plausible rights of Palestinians under the Genocide Convention. It ordered Israel to undertake immediate measures in relation to its mass and indiscriminate killing of Palestinians, to depriving Palestinians of the essential goods for their survival, to the incitement to genocide. Instead of implementing this mandatory order by the court, Israel has doubled down in the commission of its crimes. Your leaders have said in no uncertain terms that Israel is responsible for the famine underway in Gaza and has used starvation as a method of war. They have called on Israel not to use humanitarian aid as a bargaining chip. They spoke of a man-made disaster, meaning an Israeli occupation-made disaster. They have called repeatedly on Israel to stop its indiscriminate bombing and to spare civilian life to no avail. They have called repeatedly on Israel to give civilians safe haven. Instead, it attacked them even in hospitals and UN shelters. It attacked them in the very places it asked them to heed to. It killed them if they stayed and killed them if they left. And now it continues to threaten a ground operation in Rafah, where it has pushed them and confined them at the very edge of the Gaza Strip in yet another attempt to forcibly displace our people. Instead of heeding these calls, Israel has attacked those making them. It continues, in particular, its incitement against the UN, its Secretary General, whom we salute him from this place, its agencies, notably UNRWA, the lifeline for Palestinians in Gaza. The Israeli Foreign Minister wrote that UNRWA cooperates with terrorists and that the UN has become, under the leadership of Antonio Guterres, and I quote, an anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli body that shelters and emboldens terror. Defend the Secretary General and the UN. This outrageous incitement has real-life consequences for UN and humanitarian staff on the ground who are targets of attacks, who are killed, arrested, and tortured, who are humiliated and harassed. It has also real-life consequences for Palestinians, as Israel has used it as a pretext to block humanitarian aid to be distributed by UNRWA. It is time for all these Israeli actions to trigger a serious international reaction, one that enforces consequences for these crimes rather than just make pleas that Israel continues to dismiss. There is no humanity when our lives are treated as expendable. There are no rules without enforcement. And Israel has been treated as a state above the law for so long that it feels it no longer has to hide when acting as an outlaw state. From ethnic cleansing to genocide. Our agony is caused by Israelis' actions, but also by the impunity it has been afforded, by the fact countries have not taken decisive measures to stop it, and many continue to call it and treat it as an ally even while it is committing such atrocities. Mr. President, we express our appreciation to the E10, all of you, for having put forward this resolution and we welcome its adoption by the Council. We thank Algeria for representing us and all the Arab countries in this endeavor. We salute Arab unity in demanding immediate ceasefire and prevailed. This must be a turning point. This must lead to saving lives on the ground. This must signal the end of this assault of atrocities against our people. A nation is being murdered. A nation is being dispossessed. A nation is being displaced for decades now, but never at this scale since the Nakba. Never this openly, from Tantura to Gaza, from 1948 to 2024, we have endured. We have survived. We have resurrected only to face death once again. Life must prevail in Gaza. Must prevail in Gaza. Freedom must prevail in Palestine. For 6 months now, every single Palestinian in Gaza has endured untold suffering, loss, pain, and tragedy. This must stop now. Palestinian hostages, Palestinian victims are not less deserving of compassion and empathy, of outrage and solidarity. They must be freed from fear and want, from siege and occupation, from death and dispossession. Families must be reunited and start to heal, at least from the wounds that can actually be healed. They must be given the chance to bury their loved ones, to mourn their loss, to rebuild what can be. Even if the ceasefire happened now and the siege was lifted now, it would take generations to deal with the trauma and the devastation. Mr. President, now that this Council has finally called for a ceasefire, all forces should coalesce to make sure it is enforced. Apologies to those who the world has failed, to those that could have been saved and were not. Save the lives of those who survived against all odds. Tell them help is on the way. Hold accountable those who inflicted such suffering upon them. End this injustice. End it now. All of this is long overdue. And I thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine for his statement.